G'day guys, ZiggyD here, and today I want to share with you one of the crafting strategies that has been very successful for me lately, Vaal Orbing Belts. Vaaling Belts has produced me somewhere over 10 exalts this league in sales, and also a pretty nice +1 endurance charge belt that I used for my current discharge build. I've sold Vaal belts ranging in prices from 30 chaos to 3.5 exalts a piece, and it's been consistent enough that I wanted to share my strategy with you guys to help you produce a bit of extra wealth. Now, you don't just want to Vaal any belt, and you'll probably lose money if you just Vaal everything. Before you Vaal a belt, you have to consider the base belt type, the stats it has rolled, and how they align with the belt base. You'll also sometimes want to utilize master crafting to fill out specific stats where needed to try and maximize profit potential on a successful Vaal. And I will of course go over all of this in this guide. What you are primarily Vaaling belts for is to get the +1 endurance charge implicit. This is used by juggernauts and discharge builds, and is an extremely high value addition to those builds. Vaal Orbs can also land area of effect and skill effect duration, which are valuable to a wide range of builds. So first, it's important to understand what actually makes a good belt. High life and resistances are the core. Belts can roll up to 99 life on the explicit mod, so anything above 80 is considered high life. Total resistances can be close to 150%, so high resistance is anything around and over 120% total. Of course, some builds will be CI or low life, and these will want high energy shield rolls instead, anything above 40 energy shield. There is also a small market for hybrid belts as well, that is something with both over 80 life and over 40 ES together. Flask charges gained, reduced flask charges used, and flask's duration suffixes compete with resistances, but are also high value mods. Having one resist replaced by one of those is not a bad thing. The other two important stats are armor and weapon elemental damage. These are prefixes and add a lot of value to an already good belt. You're looking at over 300 armor and over 20% weapon elemental damage for high rolls on these. There is one other thing to look out for, and that is double strength belts. There is a strength base, and if you get one with say 40 plus strength on the explicit as well, along with life and resistances, then you have a very attractive belt to Iron Will or Iron Grip builds. Now armed with this information, if you want to maximize your returns on successful Vaals, then you need to first know how you can improve belts you find with master crafting. Tora's crafting bench provides a selection of belt affixes, and I will commonly add some of these cheaper but value adding mods to belts before I Vaal them. If a belt has no life or ES but very high resistances, say 120% plus total, then I'll add a 10 alteration life roll to it before Vaaling. In my opinion, it's not worth it to add the higher 4 chaos roll, as your chances of a return are not high enough to justify the cost, and a 55 life belt with high resistances isn't worth that much without a good Vaal implicit anyway. If the belt is otherwise really good but missing a prefix, then I will nearly always add weapon elemental damage. This costs 4 alks and can roll in a large range between 8 and 22. Getting lucky on a higher roll can add a lot of value to a belt, and if you also land a good Vaal. I sold a belt for 3.5x with high life, resistances, and a high master crafted weapon elemental that I Vaaled +1 endurance charge on, a great profit. If an otherwise good belt is missing a suffix, I will simply add a missing resistance. Usually the cheaper 6 augment roll unless the belt is really good. If you have a choice between resists, I recommend prioritizing lightning resist, as it's often searched for to offset the penalty of lightning coil, the unique chest. I don't recommend using the more expensive and niche options for master crafting belts that you intend to Vaal. This is because you want to keep the potential range of buyers large, and you don't want to be gambling larger crafting fees constantly. And now we get to the fun part, determining which belts to Vaal and Vaaling them. Generally speaking, the rules for Vaaling belts fall into 3 different categories. A. Belts that are not good enough to sell on their own, but would be quite valuable with an extra endurance charge. Or Category B, belts with outright bad bases. Or Category C, belts with mismatched bases to the explicit mods. As an example for Category A belt like this with an ES base, mediocre life roll, some armor and a bit of each resist is not likely to sell for much as is. It's just not a very good belt. But that same belt Vaaled with an extra endurance charge is actually quite good. With a successful Vaal, you take a belt worth several chaos at best and turn it into a belt worth 10 or 20 times that. I've sold belts like this for upwards of 100 chaos. The best thing about this category is that you aren't really gambling much. If the Vaal screws up or rerolls the affixes, then you haven't really lost anything of value, the belt wasn't very good anyway. Category B is belt bases that just are automatic Vaals, as the implicits are quite bad or niche. Studded and cloth belts are the best examples of this. Vaal these whenever they have decent explicit stats. And category C finally is when the belt base is not necessarily bad, but it does not go well with the explicit rolled stats. This one is a bit trickier, but I'll go through a few examples so you guys can learn what to look for. Here's a first example. A high life, high resistance belt on an energy shield base. Though it could be used by a hybrid build, they are quite niche, and a good implicit would be far more valuable to far more people. I would craft weapon elemental damage on this and then Vaal it. Another example is simply the reverse, a high energy shield belt on a life base. In this case it's missing a resist, so I would craft the missing one and then Vaal it. A final example is this heavy belt, high resistances, armor and life with weapon elemental damage. This is a good belt. This would be an ideal Juggernaut belt, and Juggernauts don't really need the extra strength from the implicit, so in this case the belt base is mismatched to the intended use. I would simply Vaal this and hope for that +1 endurance charge. You'll notice that I haven't really mentioned Rustic sashes. This space is pretty much always good. It's usable by melee, bows and physical spellcasters. I'd only ever Vaal one if it fell into category A and was not valuable enough to sell on its own, but would sell with an endurance charge. Good rolls on Rustic sashes should be sold as is without Vaaling. I hope you guys have found this guide helpful. If you work what you've learned here into your general crafting and trading strategy, you'll be quite likely to start noticing some solid improvements in the currency you're making. Of course, any questions you have, feel free to leave in the comments below. That is it for now. I'm ZiggyD, and thanks for watching.